What do we really know about this enemy in Iran? You hear a lot of talk about it, but talk about what? What do we really know? Well, I'm going to tell you a lot more, and we're going to dig into this deeply. Who are these people in this regime, and what's this ideology? Why is it so difficult? First, the Iranian regime is not going to surrender. It is never going to surrender. You know, we've been in wars before where we fought enemies that wouldn't surrender either. Remember the kamikazes? Remember Japan? Remember the emperor was like a demigod to the people back then? Tojo was very stubborn, very headstrong. And unfortunately, we had to drop 2 atomic bombs until they would surrender. Obviously, we're not going to do that now. But I'm talking about an enemy that is dug in. It's dug in. What do you do about it? So they're not going to surrender. First, Iran's 1979 revolution fuses radical Shia political theology with totalitarian organizational methods, reminiscent of 20th century Marxist-Leninism. The Ayatollah Khomeini adopted a Leninist party-state structure, an avant-garde clerical elite, and a worldview split between oppressors and the oppressed. In fact, he used often Marxist language right out of the Communist Manifesto. But he was a fan of Lenin's. He wasn't a fan of communism per se or the Soviet Union, but he was a fan of their techniques and their language. Just as Lenin argued that a dedicated vanguard party must seize power on behalf of the proletariat rather than waiting for the so-called organic revolution, which has been the approach of every modern communist revolution, a top-down revolution. In our country, you see the same thing. Members of the Senate and the House pushing this democratic socialism agenda, as well as others. But you see this, Gramsci wrote about it, an Italian communist, that we have to give up on Marx's idea of the proletariat rising up and overthrowing the bourgeoisie, the managers, the executives, the lawyers, the teachers, the doctors, so forth. It's got to be the top down. So we have to take over the government, take over the bureaucracy, and impose our will. So that's where that comes from. Khomeini used Shia clerics to help take political control and institute divine law throughout the Iranian culture. As a matter of fact, as they point out in the Dispatch Faith, by the 1990s, the regime had developed an interlocking network of institutions designed to preserve the revolution regardless of who occupied the highest office. The clerical establishment, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Basij militia, the intelligence services, and a sprawling network of religious foundations and economic conglomerates linked to the state together formed a system whose reach extended into every single sector of the Iranian society. Schools, universities, mosques, media, charities, major industries all operate within this structure of ideological supervision and patronage. This regime is not going to give up its nuclear and ballistic missile capacity, their development, and their know-how. Compromise with Western powers is viewed as a betrayal of the 1979 revolution and the Islamist cause. In other words, they will never sign a deal that prevents the pursuit of nuclear weapons, or if they do, it'll be completely intended as a head fake. They will never honor it. The purpose of such a deal would be to deceive our country in the West. The regime does not seek accommodation, coexistence, and it certainly will not agree to a paper agreement on its own demise. The enemy also believes that showing weakness or surrendering would invite total regime dismantling rather than relief from pressure. It will do anything and everything to ensure that its massive police state and prison system protects it from its greatest fear, the Iranian people. And as I speak, they continue to execute them. Children, teenagers, young people, whomever. Our unwillingness to arm, train, and support an Iranian resistance or opposition inside Iran is, in my long stated view here, month after month, a huge mistake. I say that with all due respect, but a mistake is a mistake. And I will continue to assert that the Reagan doctrine worked in the 1980s, which involved supporting such movements on several continents. And it also led to, in part, the collapse of the Soviet Union and many of its satellite countries in Central and South America, in Africa, and elsewhere. But apparently it's off the table. Iran's defense and missiles network are dispersed and decentralized, meaning heavy leadership strikes do not automatically collapse the entire apparatus. That said, I believe our early strikes and those of Israel at the beginning of this war, when our armed forces were fighting side by side, had a spectacular effect. But rather than spending a few more weeks to complete the job, including destroying Karg Island, the heart of the regime's economic engine, a sudden ceasefire was instituted that abruptly ended our military operations, and that sudden ceasefire changed everything. We've since sidelined the Israelis for reasons I do not understand as well. Not only did the enemy violate the ceasefire and every on and off again ceasefire, but we pursued diplomacy and deals that underscored a fundamental misunderstanding of who we're dealing with and what we're dealing with. The regime attacked the Arab Gulf states. Remember that? Still are. At first, we had spokesmen and experts who said this was a big mistake by Iran. It would widen the war. It would turn the Arab states against Iran and unify them. But the enemy did this, as is now clear, because it knew the Arab states were weak. And it knew they would put pressure on our administration to end the war effort. That is, to end military operations in order to protect their oil fields and their towns. And that's exactly what the Arab states, apart from perhaps the UAE, have done and are doing, joined by Turkey, I might add. Now, this theocracy views political opposition as a sin against divine authority, rendering compromise doctrinally impossible. The Iranian regime leadership is willing to use the Iranian people as fodder. That is, they are expendable rather than yield to us. The military structure splits control among, as I said, the IRGC, the regular army, provincial militia, the purpose of which is to prevent a single point of failure or a single target, thereby preventing, they believe, a total collapse. The regime is created and the assembly of experts. They identify the so-called reformers, not just opponents, but reformers, and they eliminate them, ensuring only hardline loyalists are in positions of power. And so now we talk about, I think the vice president said the other day, our number one priority is to keep the price of oil down, and our number two priority is to make sure they don't get nukes. I had thought our number one priority was no nukes. Our number two priority was no enriched uranium. And our number three priority is, or was, we're coming to help you, the Iranian people. Now, given everything I've told you, there's really only one way to sufficiently address what's taking place, and that is to defeat the regime. Now, people keep asking, how do you defeat the regime? The president has many great experts who can tell him how to do that, and perhaps have. Without ground troops, I have said for the 5,000th time, we don't need them. But we do have opposition groups, potential resistance groups, called the Iranian people. Many of them want to even the score with this regime, and I'm talking about a lot. To take that resource off the table, I think, has been the greatest mistake. Now let's dig a little bit further into what we're dealing with here ideologically. There's a great piece, Terror, Islam, and Democracy, by Leighton Bourmond and Roya Bourmond. If I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. In the Journal of Democracy, a couple decades back, talking about the nature of what we're dealing with here, and I want to share this with you. The idea of a pan-Islamic movement appeared in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, concomitantly with the rapid transformation of traditional Muslim polities into nation states, they write. The man who did more than any other to lend an Islamic cast to totalitarian ideology was an Egyptian. A lot of this comes out of Egypt. Was an Egyptian schoolteacher named Hassan al-Banna. 1906 to 1949. He was hanged. Deeply influenced by Egyptian nationalism, he founded the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928, the express goal of counteracting Western influences. By the late 1930s, Nazi Germany had established contacts with revolutionary junior officers in the Egyptian army, including many who were close to the Muslim Brotherhood. Banna also borrowed the idea of heroic death, terrorism, suicide bombers, and so forth, as a political art form. And so terrorism became very prominent. After the Allied victory in World War II, Banna's assassination in early 1949, and the Egyptian Revolution of 52 to 54, the Muslim Brothers, that is the Muslim Brotherhood, found themselves facing the hostility of a secularizing military government and sharp ideological competition from Egyptian communists. Sayyid Qutb, Q-U-T-B, the brothers' chief spokesman and also their liaison with the communists, framed an ideological response that would lay the groundwork for the Islamism of today. This guy, Qutb, Q-U-T-B, is the central thinker, so-called scholar of the Islamist terrorist movement today. Using Marxist terminology, he advocated a struggle by an Islamic revolutionary vanguard against both the West and traditional Islam, attaching the adjectives Islamic to such distinctively Western terms as revolution, state, ideology. Though strongly opposed by the Muslim religious authorities, his ideas influenced a whole generation of modern Islamists. In 1948, he went to study education in the United States. Once an Egyptian nationalist, he joined the Muslim Brothers soon after returning home in 1950. Qutb's brand of Islamism was informed by his knowledge of both the Marxist and fascist critiques of modern capitalism and representative democracy. He rejected them, he hated them, he embraced Marxism and fascism, Nazism, and the Soviet communist and Chinese communist movements that were just beginning in China. He called for a monolithic state ruled by a single party of Islamic rebirth. Now, they later write that a virtuous, ideologically, and self-conscious vanguard minority would have to fight by any means necessary, including violent revolution, so that a new and perfectly just society might arise. And so there is and was, for about half a century or more, this fusion of Islamism and Marxism, Islamism and fascism, that is, this notion of totalitarianism. And Khomeini, in the 1979 revolution, took it to a new level. And terrorist groups, Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Hamas, were all connected to it, were all part of this unified effort. They didn't all agree on everything, but they became a unified effort under Khomeini. Khomeini, and I might add, funded in huge measure by Qatar. Qatar has been the biggest backer of the Muslim Brotherhood, of any country, of any movement. Qatar. Turkey has embraced strongly Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And I could go on and on. But this is what we're dealing with in Iran. And in fact, Khomeini spread this whole idea of Islamism and pan-Islamism into the so-called Palestinian movement and lit a big fire under that. And that's why you see that Khomeini was supporting and Iran was supporting Hamas and so forth and so on. So many of you wonder why the Marxist left in our country march with, protest with, commit acts of terrorism with these Islamists. Or maybe you wonder why they mourn the targeting of the second Khomeini, or why they are adamantly opposed to the war against the Iranian regime. You see al-Said, who's running in Michigan. You see these other podcasters. You see a lot of this. Now, I've explained the reason is they are united in their mission to destroy our country, Israel, and the entirety of Western society. The Marxists are pursuing their revolution, and the Islamists are pursuing their revolution, and both revolutions compel the elimination of the same societal system in order to replace it and impose their own ideology on the entire world. And they figure at the end of this, well, we'll deal with the Islamists. No, we'll deal with the Marxists. It's exactly what Khomeini did in Iran. Both ideologies are extremely violent. Both rely on indoctrination, loyalty, and compliance with the cause. Both are despotic, period. And this foundation has been laid since the 40s and 50s. It really took off in the 60s and 70s, and now we're dealing with it today. I hope this provides some substantive basis for understanding what we're dealing with. It's complicated, it's difficult, but it's existential. Either they win or we win. There's no compartmentalizing. There's no diplomacy. There's no deal that's going to stop them. I'm just telling you the facts and the truth.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.